regions. And the Arctic, again, is paying the brunt of that in the high Arctic. There's about a 45% increase in precipitation already. That's a lot. That by contrast, that we have trouble finding trends. There are regional trends but in overall, over all the big territory of Canada, that it's not, we can't keep the statisticians yet happy to say that our frequency of extreme events are increasing, but some studies can say that. But we do know that already our almost extreme events are increasing in many parts. But that said, I think the evidence is getting clearer and clearer that in Canada the impacts from precipitation extremes are increasing. So that if that has a message about our vulnerability, then we have to pay attention when we start to find that the actual statistics and the pure number crunching shows that yes, things have increased. This just gives you some graphics. It's anything that's got a red dot says that the statistician would check that one off and say, yep, that's statistically significant. That wasn't chance. That's real. And the red dots indicate areas where we've had increases in mean annual daily maximum temperatures. The X's, the red axes, are areas where the trend is up. The statisticians aren't yet happy. You can see in the eastern part of the country, there are some regions, this was up to 2003. If I added the next 4 or 5 years of data, some of those X's are not going to be blue, they're going to be red. And some of those X's are going to be red circles. So the last few years of data, when this gets updated, we'll likely make a change to some of these graphics. But it had been cooling in the eastern part of Canada, and some of those regions, particularly in Nunavut, are showing very significant rises in temperature in spite of the fact that it had been cooling. They're turning that corner so fast that it's a very steep rise that's being shown. The same thing with rain. It's getting wetter in many parts. You can see a lot of green circles here, indicating in most regions, with the odd exception, because weather data doesn't always behave. There are a lot of local and other variations at play, but that we are seeing an increase in the number of days with measurable rainfall. Some parts of the country, and this reinforces that message about regional differences, are showing increases in wet conditions. That it's not just that it's raining 10 days in a row in this particular example, but that the amount of rainfall is falling over longer periods of time are becoming statistically significant. This kind of graphic gives you messages about saturated ground. And we know that in many regions, when we have a saturated ground condition, it takes a lot less rainfall to cause a flooding or high impact event than it does if we start with dry ground. So there's all kinds of implications here as well for disaster potential. The other message I want to leave with you is that that there can be large variations in our trends that we're seeing, and there will continue to be large variations from one region to the other. This is the story for Ontario. We added 10 more years of data, and meteorology, we like to work with 30-year periods of record. So we added the 1990s to the period of record and compared the analysis of just mean annual precipitation from the last 30 years compared to the previous 1 decade less ago, 30 years, that there were some significant increases. We had to add 4 new precipitation contours that hadn't been on that map before. So we had to invent some new colors. And the arrows point to them. A lot of them, and I know many of our municipalities to the lee of the Great Lakes will nod their head vigorously and saying, yeah, we're living this already, and what it appears to be happening based on the literature that's coming out in some of our preliminary studies is that the Great Lakes are not freezing over as fast, and the lake effect snow is increasing in those regions. So some parts are seeing larger increases in significant events than our others. So again, it will continue this way in the future. There will be regional variations that we will all have to deal with. So what all this comes down to is that we're vulnerable now. We have adaptation deficits. We're seeing losses for what we've already got. We're concerned that we're going to see more of these events in the future, so we had better get very serious about disaster management and emergency preparedness and emergency management. This is typically in Ontario. I have to thank Emergency Management Ontario for this graphic. It talks about the phases. We tend to think traditionally when we're involved in disaster management, we think about responding when the event comes. And that's one thing that's very important when people are in trouble. But there are a lot of other things that we can be doing that save us a lot of money after the fact. and they involve the area of risk management. Looking at where we're most vulnerable and taking the actions, including the planning actions, the infrastructure design actions, to ensure that we are less vulnerable, that we are not the sitting ducks that we may be in the future or are at the moment. So it involves everything from the upper left-hand side, the mitigation and prevention. That's codes and standards. That's emergency. That's planning. That's ensuring we don't build in floodplains or in other areas that are going to become increasingly vulnerable. The preparedness means not just it means more comprehensive planning for our emergencies. It means in the weather service we better get looking at our weather warning criteria, because the nature of our disasters is changing. The things that are coming upon us is changing. So I call those two areas at the top, risk management, getting ready. Down at the bottom I have what I call crises management. In essence, the things we have to do when these events are upon us and we must respond. And that involves, for us in the weather service, the warnings. I warned you I was in the weather country. That involves the community actions for emergency responses. And then there's another area over in the green. This is the area that perhaps is given in all of these the least attention, but which we probably should be paying a lot more, and especially in the future. And that's recovery and the rebuilding. We often, when we're in an emergency, we have to rebuild. We slap things together as fast as we can, and of course we at best may do them the same way we did them before. But guess what? Our vulnerability is just the same, if not more, than it was before. So we've got to ensure that when we rebuild things when we can, we learn from those lessons and that we don't become vulnerable as we move